When was the last time you ever heard the term food insecurity? Which, put simply, refers to a food shortage. Well, if you reside in America, you might think to yourself, food shortage in America? I mean, I can get fast food anywhere. I just left Publix. Why should you even care? Over the past 3 years, the number of people uncertain about their next meal has soared. According to the World Food Program, approximately 345 million people globally are unsure where their next meal will come from. Now, you might wonder why the plight of these 345 million people matters. And if you really think that way, chances are we're probably not going to be friends. Because of course those people matter. It's significant because this number has doubled, not over decades or even 5 years, but in just the last 3. And it's crucial to understand why. And if you've been watching for a while, you know that I talked about fertilizer and the grain shortage and the massive impact the Ukraine war would have on global food costs over a year ago, or whenever that war started. But I documented it in real time because it was obvious to me. But that doesn't mean it's obvious to you. What does the cost of fertilizer have to do with anything? Well, I'm glad you asked. The components needed to produce fertilizer, namely nitrogen, phosphate, and potash, and who possesses these resources? Where do we procure them? Does this relate to the tensions involving Belarus, Russia, and the Ukraine? Are these conflicts exacerbating the problem? Well, spoiler alert, I already talked about it a year ago. Of course it does. But wait until we dive into the data that we have right now, because it's something that you need to be aware of. And before we dive into the data, let's just look at what's happening right now in today's market and the fact that a Big Mac meal in America sold in Connecticut at McDonald's, the price for that Big Mac meal was north of $18. The customer paid something close to $22 for a Big Mac in Connecticut. And I've got friends and family in Connecticut. I got news for you. It's not like they're making gold-plated Big Macs in Connecticut. These are the same old Big Macs that we eat right here. And they sure as shit aren't worth $22. But understanding food insecurity becomes relevant because the factors that contribute to it could and will and are impacting the United States. And I know they're impacting me, and I'm sure they're impacting you too. The last time I took my family to go to Chick-fil-A, which again, it's Chick-fil-A. I've got a family of 4. It was well over $100 for Chick-fil-A. $100 for a fast food meal? You gotta be freaking kidding me. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if there's ever anything I can do to help serve or support you in the Florida housing market, please reach out because we would love to help. Now let's dive into the facts. 70% of the world's hungry people live in regions that are plagued by war and violence. And since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February of last year, Ukrainian grain exports have faced significant interruptions. For over 4 months, Russian naval vessels have blocked Ukraine ports in the Black Sea. But forget about the Russians blocking the Ukrainians' exports. Let's just use common sense. The Ukrainians are fighting a war. They're certainly not tending to the fields of agriculture that must be produced in order for the rest of the world to eat. But between July of 2022 and July of 2023, an agreement was brokered among the United Nations, Turkey, and Russia to facilitate exports through a safe maritime humanitarian corridor in the Black Sea. Over 1,000 ships laden with grain and other foodstuffs departed from Ukraine via 3 ports under the initiative. However, on July 17th of 2023, Russia announced its decision to terminate the Black Sea Grain Initiative, effectively halting these shipments. And this move has repercussions for everyone, as these 2 countries are major exporters of vital commodities. The reality of it is, Russia and Ukraine together represent a significant portion of the global trade in grain, maize, and sunflower oil, amongst other things. And prior to the invasion, Ukraine was a major provider of the world's wheat and corn. But since the invasion, the average cost of shipping agricultural products has risen from $30 to $200 per ton. That's a seven-fold increase in less than 2 years. On February 24th of 23, the U.S. Department of Agriculture reported that wheat exports over the past 6 months were approximately 37% lower than the previous year. And this is critical to understand because exporting is crucial. There are products we need from other nations. But let's look at China's strategy. They're maintaining historically high levels of food stockpiles. Why is China accumulating resources and stepping back from the global market? The World Food Program warns that by 2023, we may face shortages of wheat and corn, staple items in the global food supply chain. And these shortages could and will drive up food prices and potentially trigger a global recession. A list of countries with bans on food exports showcases various restrictions from Argentina's limits on soybean oil to India's ban on wheat, reflecting a broader trend of nations safeguarding their resources. Which begs the question, why aren't we doing the same thing? I wonder. Yet to be determined. I don't know. I sure do hope that someone in the administration is playing the long strategy rather than burying their head in the sand and victimizing the rest of the world. Now, considering the Black Sea Grains Initiative history, prices for grains and oilseeds spiked during the invasion, but started to fall with the initiative in place. But with Russia terminating the initiative, we should anticipate and plan for prices to climb again. Which brings me back to fertilizer. We noticed a stark price increase, which has escalated in recent years. And this surge is due to the cost of raw materials like natural gas, which affects nitrogen production. With the majority of the world's potash coming from Canada, Russia, and Belarus, the conflict has disrupted supply chains, further complicating food production globally. In the U.S., net farm income is projected to decrease due to rising costs. Fertilizer, accounting for about a third of annual farm costs, has increased by nearly 73% since 2020. This is a significant burden for American farmers, let alone those in the countries with devaluing currencies. And if all that wasn't bad enough, drought is another factor driving food insecurity, with South America experiencing its worst drought in a century. And this affects the production of key global agricultural commodities. And lastly, the just-in-time inventory system, while efficient, can be problematic in times of crisis. It requires a flawless chain of production and reliable suppliers, which, as we've clearly seen, can be anything but reliable. Look, let's face it, the reasons for food insecurity are complex and interconnected, involving geopolitics, economics, climate change, and logistics. And while you're probably asking, what does food supply or food insecurity have anything to do with the housing market or the home values in Florida? Understanding these nuances is essential for both policymakers, the general public, and the American consumer. It's about time we recognize the food on our table is not a given. It's a privilege that we must protect with sound policy and global cooperation. And unfortunately, the one thing I haven't seen much of over the last few years is cooperation or unity. And I'm going to go out here on a limb and quote Superman's original motto, whatever happened to truth, justice, and the American way? I suspect it's time to get back to those values. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, check out my next video because I suspect you will love it a lot. And until next time,